Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, Happy New Year to you all. We've made it through 2020. What a crazy year. And a lot of people have told me that, I have gotten so much out of my life that I feel like there's a book inside of me that needs to come out. So this is a continuation on last week's conversation. Now, last week we talked about how to write a memoir, but I want to talk about how to write a nonfiction book and actually go into more granular detail here. Specifically, how to become a nonfiction published author. So my special guest today is Jennie Nash. She's the founder of Author Accelerator, which is a business that has trained more than 60 book coaches around the world to support writers through their entire writing and creative process. Author Accelerator also matches writers with the right coach who can give them the sustained editorial support that they need to complete their book projects. Now, she's spent 30 plus years on all sides of the publishing industry, and she's the author of 9 books as well in 3 different genres. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Jennie Nash. Hey, Jennie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Congratulations on surviving 2020.
Thank you. It's great to be in the new year.
Well done, you. And, one of those books that you have written and released is called The Writer's Guide to Agony and Defeat. I love that. The 43 worst moments in the writing life and how to get over them. Now, when I read this book, never have I felt more heard and seen than in that moment as I'm reading through this. And certainly there is a lot of agony and feelings of defeat when you're writing a book. So my goodness, the fear alone of saying that you're an author in the first place is a scary one to overcome. What do you tell those kinds of people that are like, I think I want to do this, but it's so big and scary?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I talk about when I talk about that with people is that the thing that you're scared about is not the thing that you're really fearing. So usually there's a top level set of things that you're afraid about, which are along the lines of, is my idea any good? Will anybody care? Will anybody buy it?
Right.
Do I even know what I'm doing?
Right.
Am I going to embarrass myself? Should I even try? Should I even bother? Is it worth the time?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things in that bucket that people focus on. But what's underneath that is what's really important. And what's underneath all of that is the reality that writing a book is an act of raising your voice. It's claiming space. It's saying, I have something important to say and I want people to listen. And that is a really big psychological shift for people to move through. And it is not small. And the more people that I work with, the more that I believe this to be true. And what's interesting is I work with a lot of very accomplished people. So they're usually area experts in their field. They might be CEOs of a company. They might already be a thought leader in some way. This might not be their first book. They're usually just very accomplished people. And the more accomplished they are, the more this is an issue for them, which seems counterintuitive. But it's because you're really taking up space and claiming that you believe this thing, and that's what's hard.
Well, I mean, you say it right from the opening gate inside your book. If you don't mind, I'll read. Writing a book is like childbirth. No one ever tells you exactly how painful the process is going to be. And when you're in the middle of hurting, you wonder if you are perhaps the only person in the history of the world who has ever felt exactly this awful. The possibilities of agony and defeat are everywhere. At the start of the process, when the book idea is forming in your mind and doubt is pounding on the door. In the middle of the process, when you begin to show your words to the world and fear gnaws at you like a disease. And at the end of the process, when you hope your work will find an adoring audience and must come face to face with how much greed and envy has taken up residence in your heart. Woof.
Right?
And I think most things, it's the same as riding a bicycle. Most times you fall flat on your face. So the first, 10 or 20 times you try, right? But over time, it does get better. But as you say, the stakes get higher as you and your thought leadership or your expert position in your work world increases, right?
It does. It does. The stakes are actually really high, and that's why it's such a fraught. I think writing a book is really hard, and I stand in opposition to all of the do it fast schemes and programs and ideas that are out there.
Yeah.
And the reason I stand in opposition to them is not just that I think they lead writers astray. Writing is not just sitting at a keyboard and producing a certain number of words.
Yeah.
It's at least writing if you want people to read it. It is different. It is a different thing to seek publication than it is to write for your own self. And most of us start out writing for our own self. We're journal writers, or we write to make sense of the world, or we write because we like to be immersed in words and ideas. Maybe we're writing poetry or short stories, or maybe even a full-length book, or we blog, or we write newsletters, or we do social media, and so we're kind of immersed in it. But the act of writing a book has to be much more intentional, and it is a long-term, complex intellectual undertaking. And so I stand in opposition of this sort of write fast schemes because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't take the same practices that you use to do that other kind of writing and just kind of overlay it onto writing a book. You have to be intentional about why you're writing. You have to know who you're writing for. You have to know what your goals are and how you're going to measure the outcome. And you have to know all those things so that you know how much time to invest, how much money to invest, should you seek an agent and a traditional publishing deal. And you can't answer all those questions if you don't know why you're doing it.
Right. And that's why it is important, it sounds, to start there, to define your why. So why is it that, do you think, people overlook that step, or want to jump past and just get straight into the writing? What do you think that is going on behind that?
There's something very curious that is behind that. And that is, I just reeled off a lot of ways that one can be in the world as a writer. One can be a blogger. One could be a newsletter writer. You could write for your job at work. Maybe you're in communications. Maybe you're in PR. Maybe you're a lawyer. Lawyers do a lot of writing for work. We write. That is what we do. And even more than that, as human beings, we tell stories every day, all the time. How was your day? You reel off what happened. Oh my gosh, this crazy thing happened at the eye doctor. Oh my gosh, I ran into this dog when I was out walking. We're always telling stories. And so we think that we know how to do it.
Yeah.
And we don't, to contrast that with something else, we don't go around thinking that we know how to do heart surgery. It's not something that we're just kind of do in our day-to-day lives. We have literally nothing to do with what heart surgery would be, most of us.
Yeah.
And similarly, we don't go around, let's say, playing the piano. I mean, some people perhaps know how to play the piano, but I'm talking about playing it like John Legend knows how to play the piano, right? We're not doing that every day. And so the thing I think our brains get tricked into thinking, I know how to write. I write all day long. I've been writing since I was 12 years old. I can do this. And then furthermore, when you're reading a book, the experience is extremely linear and logical because the writer has done the work for you to put that content into a container that you experienced in a linear fashion. And it is very easy to lull yourself into thinking, like people I think literally say in their head, I'm a really good reader. I know how to start a book and engage with that idea all the way through in that way. And maybe they go to a book club and they know how to analyze it or reverse engineer it or that sort of thing. And so we lull ourselves into thinking that those things are the same as knowing how to write a book.
Yeah.
And they're just 100% not.
So then how do we begin to define our why? Is it the why of why this book exists, or the why of why are we writing it, or a mixture of the two, or beyond?
Well, there's different layers. So I definitely suggest starting with why do I care? So what is your relationship to this idea? Why does it matter to you? Are you angry about something? Are you jealous of something? Are you ambitious for something? What is it that is connecting you to this idea? And that question alone can be so deeply clarifying. And if you can't answer it, I would say that you can never write a book that is going to get other people's attention. If you don't know why you care enough to put this into a book, you're never going to get there. So you have to start with that. And then that's going to lead you to, there's a series of questions that are all connected, but it's going to lead you to the next one, which is who else is going to care? And why are they going to care? Have they already read 10 books on this topic, but they haven't gotten the answer I'm going to give? Have they already read 10 books on this topic and they're mad at those books? Have they never picked up a book on this topic because the way the books on this topic are marketed are somehow not speaking to them? Are they, you've really got to know who that person is, who that ideal reader is, what their pain is. So when you go to buy a book, especially a nonfiction, this is true of any book, but especially a nonfiction how-to or self-help or narrative book, you have a very particular need in mind. You're seeking something very specific. And so if you can think about what are they Googling? What are they looking for? What are they trying to solve or figure out? What is that pain? And you can speak to that pain. Now you know why you care about this idea, and you know why your ideal reader might care about this idea. And the other thing that you've done in that process is you've identified the landscape that it is going to exist in, the marketplace, the other books that are like it. A lot of writers will make this mistake. They'll say, there's never been another book like mine. Nobody's ever written this type of thing. And that's true. Each book is very unique, but publishers and agents and editors and publishers actually do not want to hear that there's never been another book like yours. They want, so let's just take any sort of situation. You're learning how to cook. Maybe I recently bought my husband a book on grilling vegetables. He got really into grilling vegetables this summer, and kind of unusual, like a whole cauliflower or, whatever it was.
Yeah.
We made baba ganoush, where you grill the eggplant and then you make a mushy dish out of it. So he kind of got into it. So I go to search for a book on grilling vegetables. I mean, it's just, there's so many, right? It's so interesting. It's like, there's grilling vegetables when you're having a party and you're cooking hamburgers and then you need something for your guests. And then there's grilling vegetables when you're vegan. And then there's grilling vegetables for entertaining. Like, you could go on and on and on. And any topic is like that.
Yeah.
And you go down this rabbit hole of grilling vegetables. So if you, writer, are called to write a book about grilling vegetables, you've got to know why you care. And that's going to be, related to something you actually believe deeply about vegetables. And you're going to have to identify that.
Yes.
And then you're going to have to think, okay, does my ideal reader already have all these books? Do they have 2 of these books? Do they even buy books? Am I going to reach them in a different way that they normally, my reader doesn't go into a bookstore or doesn't read book blogs or doesn't read food blogs? Because there's something about them, and there's this other way I'm going to reach them. And that's the kind of thinking you've got to do.
Well, it's really interesting. As you were saying all of that, it reminded me so much of the fact that what you're talking about is very much like starting a new business. You think about your primary audience, you think about the thing that you are so good at, or it comes innately to you, or is an experience that you can share with others. You think about people's pain points. I mean, every single thing that you've said translates to starting a new business, which I know a lot of our listeners are well familiar with that. But you and I spoke previously, and we talked about the concept of a book proposal and how a book proposal, in essence, is like a business plan for your nonfiction book. So, talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, and what you say is exactly true. And it's the reason that I exist in the world at all, which is to work at the intersection of a book, which is a dream for a lot of people. It's this fantasy dream and business. It's bringing those two pieces together. And writing a book is, even if you're writing about dragons for middle grade readers and it's going to be fiction, it is absolutely a business. You have to see it that way. You have to approach it that way. And this whole myth of like, oh, I just create and then people find me, or I just write what I want to write and I sit and other people take care of reaching readers, or all of that is really damaging to the writer. So I'm all about thinking of it as a business. You're absolutely right. And the book proposal is a document that is encapsulates all the things that this book is going to be from an editorial standpoint, a marketing standpoint, a business standpoint. You answer all the questions for it's almost like making the business case for this book. And that book proposal is what most nonfiction books are sold on. If you're going to an agent and a traditional publisher, you cannot really do that without a book proposal. That's the path through which you get a deal for a nonfiction book. And many times you get the deal on the proposal, not you don't write the book, you just write the proposal. And writing the proposal is taking all the very hardest work of book writing and concentrating it into one document.
Right. So let's talk about that one document. Let's deep dive there for our listeners. So this one document, talk to me about the structure of it. What's included inside your book proposal?
So there's some very standardized sections that are going to be in every single book proposal, and you can find those in a million places by Googling what's in a book proposal. But I mean, I can reel them off to you. There's a summary or an overview of what the book is going to be. There's an author bio. There is an audience analysis. There's comp titles. That's the comparative or competitive titles.
And real quick on that, that's the idea of going into a bookstore and saying, where does your book sit on the rack? What bookstore is it next to? What section or category, right?
That's right. And sometimes it's looking, just depending on the project, it's looking, I just was working with a client who's writing a book for mothers of daughters, and it's a book on eating and nutrition. So it is a parenting book, it's a nutrition book, and it's also a little bit of a self-help for the mother book. It touches on all three of those areas. And so a lot of the work we have been doing is seeding that idea in within the context of those other books and trying to think, how is that ideal reader, where are they going to look for this? Where are they going to most notice it? And because a book does have to sit on a particular shelf. Yeah. So that's what that section is all about. There is in the book proposal, I think the hardest section of all is an annotated table of contents. So that's literally envisioning the entire book and what will be in it in a very detailed way. And then the heart of the whole thing is, there's marketing plan. And then which is, how are you going to reach your reader in the world? And then there are sample chapters. And so my clients' book proposals are around in the neighborhood of 50 to 75 pages. And that is because the sample chapters, usually you have 2 of them. So depending how long they are is going to mean longer or shorter on a proposal. But you can see that it's a 360 view of the whole book and everything that's in it, why it exists, why you're the one to write it. And the goal is to answer the question that any agent or editor is going to have. And those questions are going to be, why does this book need to be in this world? Why is this the person to write it? How are we going to market it and get it into readers' hands? What are we going to tell the salespeople and the marketing people and, the PR people. So they're in their gears are turning, trying to answer all those questions. And the role of the book proposal is to lay the whole case out so that they can move through that and answer all those questions and at the end say, boom, yes, we were going to get behind this.
And so, I mean, it's so fascinating when you lay it out like that. It makes a perfect sense to me because at the end, what it's doing is helping these people mitigate risk, right? So
Yes.
a literary agent's going to read this proposal and go, is this something that's viable in the marketplace now, commercially? And will it sell?
Yes.
Which, mitigates the risk on their part of not presenting an author forward to their publishers and their very established contacts is not being a flop. The publishers don't want to flop either because they're going to be investing time, money, resources, and otherwise, and want to eventually make money. So is there other reasons why, a book proposal is a handy and necessary first step to write before you actually go down and write everything else?
Yeah, there's several. So the second reason that it is so effective to proceed in this way is that what often happens is the agent will get a hold of a book proposal and they will want to tweak something. And that tweak might be small or large. And they're going to have a conversation with the author based on this proposal. We see this. Would you be willing or interested or able to make this change? Because we think this change needs to happen in order to sell this book. And then you can have a conversation about that because it's not a finished, if you have 350 pages of something that's finished, changing it is a little bit like changing direction on an aircraft carrier.
Right.
And changing direction on a book proposal. I'll give you an example. I worked with an author this year she's a journalist, an on-air television anchor in a major American market. And she had a incredibly compelling story, terrible, tragic story. Her mother was murdered 20 years ago. And so the why do you care? Well, of course, that's obvious from a personal standpoint, but from a book writing standpoint, why do you care about writing about this thing? Now, this particular author had several reasons for why now. Part of the why now was she had children. Her children were getting to be a certain age. They were starting to ask questions about why don't we have a grandma? It was starting to be compelling again in her own life. She felt like enough time had passed that she was able to confront the idea now in a logical way, whereas before she hadn't. So she had some personal reasons why, but she also had some whys that were deeply connected to her work. In this year, which was 2020, the role of journalism in public life came under fire. It became an incredibly important topic for a lot of different reasons. And as a journalist, she became increasingly interested in the idea of what role do journalists play in amplifying tragedy, in serving it up to people. Why do we do this? What is our motivations and roles in it? And the combination of those two things were what compelled her for why this book, why now, why do I care? And for her reader, she was really identifying journalists and other people who were interested in the news as a cultural entity. And then there was also this true crime angle. Yeah. So I helped her develop a book proposal with the sample chapters, with all the elements we just discussed, and we had a lot of conversations about this one particular thing, which was she had an experience during her experience with her mother's murder, where she lost her faith in God, and she regained it over time, and in fact became prominent figure in a group of women in this particular faith that she was in. And she became a speaker. She started a conference. She became somebody who people followed around this idea of faith after tragic loss.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about how big a role should faith play in this book. And she made the decision to downplay it. And she did that because she thought it would make the book more mainstream and more compelling to a mainstream audience. And it was completely her choice. But what happened when we took the book proposal out to agents is exactly what we were talking about. There's a whole other conversation, but we formed a strategy for how to pitch. And the strategy included going to a group of Christian agents and who would have a channel to Christian publishers, which is a massively big market. And then we had a group of non-Christian agents that would go to a more mainstream audience. And she wanted to test the waters, even though this topic had been downplayed in her book, it was there. So she wanted to test the waters. And so we went out to a combination of those two buckets of different kinds of agents. And the most fascinating thing happened, which was people from both camps came back to her and said, we want the God story. And so then she had to make a decision. Do I want the God story?
Yeah.
And then she decided that she did. And then she actually decided to do that with a mainstream agent. So that's what a book proposal can do for you it's still, the way I like to talk about it is, if you are a potter and you're making a vase, you start with wet clay. It's completely malleable. You're forming it into a shape and a size and you have a vision for it. But if you put it, I mean, I'm not a potter, but if you put it under plastic overnight, you can still go back and manipulate it and do something to it before you go bake it in the oven.
Yeah.
And that's what a book proposal allows you to do, is have an experience where you can still manipulate it. It's malleable. It's still changeable. And that's very powerful.
Well, so want to clarify also, obviously, a nonfiction book, we're going down the traditional path of getting an agent and then an agent pitching to a publishing house. This is not a nonprofit business. They are not doing it for charity's sake. Most times, I'd say probably 99.9% of the time, they're not. So back to the making sure that your book and your concept and your idea is commercially viable. Like, what in your mind helps make you more attractive to that literary agent and then later to that publisher?
Well, you talked before about mitigating risk, and I think, unfortunately, more and more the publishing industry is looking for low-risk projects. Right. And low-risk projects for them are celebrity projects, people with 500,000 Instagram followers, kind of baked in what they call platform. And platform is not just a bunch of people that follow you. I mean, if you have 1 million Twitter followers, that's going to get their attention. But it's people that you can actually sell those books to, that you have a direct channel to sell those books to, that if you say, hey, my followers, I have a book out, 80% of them are going to buy it. That's mitigating risk for the publisher. What's interesting in a whole other conversation is, if that is in fact the case, you might not need the publisher. So if you can reach that many readers directly your own self, why do you need that publisher? That's another question entirely. But from the publisher's standpoint, that you're trying to mitigate risk. And so the more an author can come with that baked in or built in following or platform or just the ability to sell books, the more likely the publisher is to take that project seriously.
And that would also include, obviously, an engaged email list as well. So, you have an email list of people you consider your gospel choir, then that would be attractive to them also, right?
Totally. Very attractive. And in many cases, an engaged email list is the best possible thing, because you can directly contact them. They're listening to you already. If you have, let's just say, to make it easy, you have 100 Twitter followers, and then there's another person who has 100 email subscribers. The email list is obviously far more valuable, because you put something out on Twitter and 3 out of the 100 people see it at that given moment or ever. And maybe 10, but on your email list, most of them see it, depending on what your open rate is. So that is a very attractive thing, an engaged audience.
Well, and I can imagine also, I mean, gosh, over the last 3 to 5 years, you can tell it's blaringly obvious when you see brands or small businesses that have either bought followers or bots or things like that. They've got 30,000 followers on Facebook, but when they post something, it's like getting 1 or 2 likes every post. The numbers don't match up. And I would imagine an agent or a publishing house is going to see right through that also.
Oh, yeah.
So don't do that. Bad idea.
No, they absolutely do. And the other thing is, don't build up your. I was working with a client earlier this year who had a robust following on Instagram of around 20,000 people, very highly engaged. And she had an idea and put together a proposal and went out to publishers and got a lot of pushback that it wasn't a big enough platform. Now, part of the reason that she was getting that pushback was because of the type of book that it was, and there were a lot of things around it. So she got extremely upset and frustrated. It's like, what do they want from me? Yeah. And so you don't want to go play the game. Several of them said, come back to us when you've doubled that list. And she's like, I'm not going to go out and do that for them. That doesn't make any sense to me. So you have to, that goes back to, why are you doing this? What do you want out of this book? What is your goal for this book? And all of those questions.
And it feels a bit like a chicken and an egg kind of conversation, because, a lot of times brands will, or leaders will want to publish a book so that they can speak more at conferences and get on stage. And so when they get on stage, they're going to build their presence and, their following. So it's one feeds into the other, right?
It is. And I mean, the thing to remember is that there are always, always, always exceptions. Yeah. And you just never know. And so you have to, when I say you never know, publishing involves a roll of the dice at a lot of different points in the process. And you have to know why you're doing this and why you care, because otherwise you're just going to get beat down. And, the process is not going to be satisfying or successful for you. But if you know your intention and you know your goals and you know where it fits into the grander scheme of your business and you know what you're going to get out of it, then the investment you make of time and energy to produce this proposal is going to be excellent. And that actually brings me to the third. You asked, why else would you write a book proposal? And I was talking here about the second reason. Reason one is because you can sell a book before you write it. Reason two is you can collaborate with experts in publishing to make it a better book before it's done. Yeah. And then the third reason would be, writing a proposal is giving yourself a roadmap to that book so that you can very easily finish the writing of it. So I work with a lot of people. My superpower is the very, very, very beginning steps of what is your idea and what is the shape and structure of that. And the more time I can get people to spend on that, the better the outcome is going to be. And I know that. I've been doing that a long time, and I've zeroed in on that part of the process. So I have people coming to me for that part of the process where we work on just the idea. We work on just the structure. What is it? Who is it for? What are the comp titles? Those kind of boundaries of this idea. And after that, they can walk away and they'll have a rough draft of a book proposal. Polishing the book proposal is kind of a beast, and it's a whole other thing. But you can have that rough draft of a proposal and never approach an agent or a publisher, but have done all the hard work of writing a book in a concentrated period of time, so that now in your very busy life, you can follow this roadmap step by step. Like, oh, I know exactly what this chapter is supposed to be. I know exactly what's in it. I know the mix of my stories and other people's stories. I know the tone. I know, the content. Like I've separated out the figuring out from the writing. And people get into so much trouble when they try to figure out by writing. You can do it. I have done it. People do it. Famous people will talk about doing it all the time. It is possible, but it's wildly inefficient. And everything I do is about think before you write. So if we're going to simplify the whole thing down, it would be think before you write. Do the work of figuring out before you write, so that when you write, you're not fraught. You're not struggling.
Yeah. Well, and I can 100% agree to what you're saying, because 2020 was a year for me to sit down and write the first of a series of books. And I kept hitting up against the roadblocks that you're talking about here of just going, well, right, if I just focus and I give myself a whole month, surely I'll crank it out in that. No, of course it didn't happen. Well, if I sign off of social media and take a digital detox, then I'll have the space. But I really think that you're absolutely right. When putting together a book proposal, it's bringing me flashbacks of being back in school again and structuring a book report or a big research paper. You start to see the pieces that are the weakest, the places where you need to get more research or more data or case studies or whatever. And then it starts to come together as a whole. I can certainly see the value in what you're saying. So let's flash forward then. A person has written the book proposal. They have gone through the process of editing it down. They've maybe worked with a book coach like yourself or any of yours in your network. And they're starting to pitch it out to those literary agents. And let's say they have actually gotten a book deal through a publisher. What does that actually mean, though, Jennie? Break that down, because I think that that's really important. There's sort of the Jennifer Lopez dream story in the Hollywood narrative of what getting a book deal means. But what does it actually mean in real life?
Well, it's funny because yesterday, one of my clients landed an agent yesterday, and it was kind of the fantasy version of how this works, where she literally pitched one agent. There were a lot of reasons for that on Friday, and on Sunday the agent requested the material, and so the initial pitch is just a letter, a query letter, and on Monday morning offered representation. So it was just kind of that crazy dream that I tell people never happens and don't expect it to happen.
Yes.
And there it happened. It was pretty great. But so there's two pieces. When you send the proposal to an agent, and the agent is going to sign you for representation. And what that means is they will represent as your agent that project to the publisher. So there's three pieces to the pitch. You write a letter to the agent to get them to request the material. Then you send that book proposal to them. They have a conversation. They sign you. They may work on that proposal, as I mentioned. They may tweak it. They may ask you to do quite a bit of work on it. They may say, I'm going to send this out next week. You don't know how much work they might want to do on it, but that's one stage. And then the agent is going to pitch that proposal to the publisher on your behalf.
Yeah.
So that's what's called going out on submission. So then there's a whole bunch of different things that can happen, but let's say you get an offer of a book deal from a publisher. Now you're under contract to write that book. So the first thing you'll do is you'll finish writing the book if you've done the proposal. And the beauty of that situation is that now you're working with an editor to complete that book, and you're not all alone out in the world trying to figure it out by yourself.
Yeah.
So that's typically what happens. And then they will put a pub date out there in the world. And the important thing to know about the traditional publishing deal is it is extremely slow. People are shocked at how slow it is. You can expect to have a book. If you sell a book on January 1st, let's say, it's not entirely clear that your book is going to be out within that calendar year. It's likely to be out the following year. So it's a very, very slow process. And so you'll have a pub date, and there will be a series of things that have to happen. Namely, you'll have to finish the book, and that writing under that kind of pressure is, some people like it because it's like, well, somebody's paying me to hit these deadlines now.
Yes.
So surely I'm going to hit these deadlines. But I'm working with a client right now who had a series of devastating personal losses. And she's on a deadline with a big publishing deal with a big publishing house. And it has been really hard. Yeah. And you can't just say, I changed my mind, because they've got that book on the schedule. They've probably ordered the paper. There's a whole series of things that have happened. And so that deadline is usually pretty set in stone. So you're gonna hit that deadline, and then the publisher's going to bring the book out for you. So what does that mean? That means that they're going to produce, print, and distribute the book. So producing a book means, how big is it going to be? What is the font size going to be? Is it hardback or paper? Is it ebook first or hardback together? Is it, all the questions of the physical or digital reality of that object or thing?
Yeah.
They're going to form a marketing plan to distribute it and get it out into, is it going to be bookstores? Is it going to be Costco? Is it going to be Target? Is it going to be, how are we going to distribute and market this book in the world? And the piece that most writers are horrified at is how little that publishers do to market books. The marketing is really on the author's shoulders, and people don't like that. They don't want to believe that. They want to think, if I get a book deal, somebody else takes care of all that for me. And that is true if you are Stephen King. It's true if you're J.K. Rowling. It is true if you're Barack Obama. It is not probably true if this is your first book deal, unless you hit the lottery and got a really big advance, because now they're going to put that marketing muscle behind it. But the vast majority of books are going to be, it's going to be on you. So there's a whole calculus to go through on what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a traditional publishing deal. Do I value what it's going to give me, or would I rather go a different route with a hybrid publisher or self-publishing, where I might be able to go faster, I might have more creative control, I might get more money at the end of the day? There's pros and cons to weigh, but the traditional publishing path is that they do the production, the distribution, and some marketing on your behalf. But no matter what, at the end of the day, when that book comes out, nobody is going to care as much as you do about getting it into readers' hands. And so that's why with a nonfiction book, especially, you need to know at the very start, again, why are you doing it? What are you going to get out of this? How is it going to impact your other business? Yeah. And is that ROI going to be worth it? Because when you run the numbers, you're not making money on this book. That's really what it is. And I am a high-priced book coach. I'm very expensive. And anybody that comes to work with me is probably not going to earn that money back right away. And they have to know that. They have to know this is a long-term investment, and there's a lot of other reasons to write a book than making money. If somebody comes to me and says, well, what's the ROI, and what's the most you've ever, advanced one of your clients has ever gotten? And I'm just like, I can't even work with you, because that's just not even the right question to ask.
Yeah, and I have given advice over the years that, that first book is just, you got to get it out there. It's not where the money is made. It's the loss leader. It's the one that builds brand awareness, and all the things. It's the calling card, if you will. It's the second, third, fourth book that builds upon that, where it starts to turn over quicker, faster, better. But I imagine also probably for you as the author, you've gone through the process. You're no longer doing, something you've never done before for the very, very first time. So maybe the process is faster in the second, third, and fourth book as well, theoretically.
No.
Hopeful thinking.
I just finished working with Lisa Cron, who's the author of Wired for Story and Story Genius, and her third book Story or Die is coming out shortly after we speak. And so I've worked with her on 3 books, and it just gets harder.
Well, I mean, these are the myths that we need to dispel because we just don't know. And, you talked to me previously about the myth out there of like, getting a book deal means you've made it or you've been picked. Talk to us more about those other myths that writers and aspiring writers believe that comes with the magical unicorn book deal.
Yeah. There's so many things that people believe that are going to happen or that are going to change when they get a book deal.
Right.
Among the things that I hear are, I'm going to quit my day job. I'm going to get on Oprah. I'm going to be on the cover of Forbes, whatever the fantasy is. And it's just not true. Yeah. It doesn't work like that.
It works for 0.00001% of the people out there, I'm guessing.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So again, coming back to why are you writing it? How do you measure and define success of this project? Because it sounds like the ROI is incredibly low, not very fun in the process. And hopefully we haven't talked most of the people listening out of the idea of writing a nonfiction book. But there's so much more to it. And I really literally feel like I could speak to you for days. Maybe we need to do a part 2 at some point as well, but I'm going to leave people here. You have to check out her book. First and foremost, the book that I read that I loved was The Writer's Guide to Agony and Defeat, the 43 worst moments in the writing life and how to get over them. You can also visit her website, authoraccelerator.com. That's where you can find out about her Author Accelerator program and, also matching writers with book coaches that can help give them that support through that entire process. You also have another book, another website called bookcoaches.com. So you train people who want to become book coaches through that path also. Now, I have a few questions as we wrap up, Jennie, that I'd like to ask everyone. And again, thank you so much. I feel like, what you're doing is you're letting people peek behind the magic Wizard of Oz curtain and really see what's behind it. And once you start to see what's behind it, it becomes less scary, I think. The unknowns of what you don't know is what's so scary a lot of times, right?
It's true. And I don't want people to leave with the impression of like, this sounds terrible. I don't want to do this. Why would anybody do this? There are so many really compelling and powerful reasons to write a book. And becoming a thought leader and codifying your ideas and pinning them to the page and having this thing you can press into people's hands is considered in our culture. People confer a lot of power on people who write books. And that is, there is no doubt about that. There is no doubt that very good things come from it. So it is business-wise often a very smart thing to do. And I believe from a personal standpoint, a very smart and powerful thing to do, because to circle back to the very beginning, raising your voice, claiming your space, taking up that airspace with the thing that you believe in, that you want to say is incredibly satisfying and powerful thing to do.
And can make a positive impact on the world. Yes, absolutely. So flipping the page, Jennie, tell us what's one book or blog that you're reading right now that's either inspiring you or maybe even poking holes and challenging your belief system.
Well, I am reading Seth Godin's brand new book called The Practice, and it is not challenging my belief system. It is playing right into it because it's all about how creativity and making things and putting them into the world is not this magic, close your eyes, cross your fingers kind of process, but it is a thing that you practice and that you do over and over and over again, and you habituate, and that is where the juice is. And that is what people who are continually making things that matter to other people, that's what they're doing. So The Practice, I think it's amazing. That's
an excellent recommendation. So we'll put a link in the show notes for that book and all the resources we talked about in this episode. You can find that at thesimplifierspodcast.com. So tell us, who's one person, somebody that you know personally, you just feel is up to brilliant things, and we could shine a spotlight on them, and who knows, maybe one day we'll have them on the podcast as well.
Well, I don't know this person personally, but I feel like I do because I've been stalking her for some years
Yes.
now. Her name is Rachel Rogers, and she runs a organization called Hello Seven, which is $1 million. Hello Seven is getting to $1 million. She's a Black woman. She is on fire to get other Black women to make money, and all women especially to make money. And I'm obsessed with her podcast, her blog, her everything. And she has a brand new book coming out in 2021 that I deeply wish I had something to do with, but I have nothing to do with other than that I'm going to buy a lot of copies and give them away. It's going to be called We Should All Be Millionaires. But it is for any entrepreneur, for any writer, for anybody who's making anything. She's just so much about claiming your space and asking for what you're worth. And she is just fire.
Love it. That is perfect. Well, we will link up with Rachel and include her in the show notes as well if you guys are curious to find her. So I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what's one thing you're grateful for today?
I am grateful today that I made a pivot last year and stuck with it during a very difficult year, because the light is already shining on that decision as being very smart. And I'm just grateful for past me for doing it and being brave and having faith in what I was doing.
Well done, you. Hey, have you ever done that thing? I do this with my clients. Write an email to yourself today that says, just congratulating yourself as if you were your own best friend, going, man, that was such a brilliant thing that you did there, blah, 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 blah. This is what's so great. And then you actually schedule delivery for it to send and drop into your inbox.
Oh, that's amazing. I got to do that.
3 months or 6 months or 12 months down the line. Talk about future Jenny. She would really appreciate getting that email, I bet.
Definitely.
So you can connect with Jenny on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is Jennie Nash. That's JENNIE Nash. We'll have all these links in the show notes for people so people can connect with you directly there. Jenny, I have one final question for you. And again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, letting us peek behind the curtain. And I know there's so many people that have been feverishly writing notes during this whole episode. So someone somewhere is listening right now to us, and she's inspired. She has not pressed the big red F it button and said, nope, not going to become an author. That's not my goal for this year. She said, you know what? I see it. It's scary. And I'm going to still push through this because I believe in what I have to say as a book idea. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
It would be think before you write. Take some time, however you do that in your life. If it's every morning you sit down and you plan your day, if it's every week you sit down and you plan the next week, whatever your time for sitting and contemplating or strategizing, do some thinking about what you want to write. Just give some space, some white space on the calendar to that, and think through those questions of why am I doing this? Who is it for? What do I want out of it?
Yeah.
Those questions and that time is going to pay off enormously.
And we can't wait to read your book soon. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate you.
Thank you.